Jake sat at that upscale restaurant, checking his watch and smoothing his hair, expecting another romantic dinner funded by another generous girlfriend. What he didn't expect was to find 5 women sitting at his reserved table, each holding bank statements showing exactly how much money he'd stolen from them. $60,000 total. And the night was just getting started. If you've ever been played by someone who seemed too good to be true, you need to hear this story. Hit that subscribe button because today we're diving into how one man's elaborate romance scam got turned against him in the most epic way possible. Like this video if you believe con artists deserve to be conned right back. Let's get into it. It started like every perfect love story you see in movies. I was scrolling through a dating app after another disappointing week of work, and there he was, Jake Morrison, 28, with the kind of smile that made you stop scrolling and actually read his profile. Entrepreneur recovering from a startup failure, it said. Looking for someone genuine who understands that success isn't just about money. His photos showed him hiking at art galleries, reading books in coffee shops. He looked sensitive, thoughtful, maybe a little vulnerable. When we matched, his first message wasn't the usual "hey" or some crude pickup line. Instead, he wrote, "I noticed you work in marketing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on authentic brand storytelling over coffee sometime. There's this little place I discovered that serves the most incredible Ethiopian blend." I was hooked immediately. Our first date was everything I'd been hoping for. Jake arrived 15 minutes early, brought me a single sunflower, because roses are what everyone expects, but sunflowers are optimistic, and spent 3 hours asking thoughtful questions about my career, my dreams, my family. He listened with the kind of intensity that made me feel like the most fascinating person in the world. When the check came, he reached for his wallet, then paused with this embarrassed expression. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. I thought I had my card, but I must have left it in my other jacket. This is mortifying." "Don't worry about it," I said, already pulling out my credit card. "I've got it." "You're incredible," he said, his eyes actually getting a little watery. "I promise I'll make this up to you. It's just, things have been tight since the startup collapsed, but I didn't want to cancel because I was so excited to meet you." That vulnerability, that honesty about his struggles, made me want to protect him. Here was a man who wasn't trying to impress me with money or status. He was just genuinely interested in me as a person. Over the next few weeks, Jake was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. He texted good morning and good night every day. He remembered details about my work presentations and asked follow-up questions. He sent me articles he thought I'd find interesting, always with thoughtful commentary about why they reminded him of our conversations. The financial pattern started small. He'd suggest restaurants and activities, then apologize when it came time to pay. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. I got this freelance project that's supposed to pay next week, but they're dragging their feet. Can you cover this and I'll get the next 3? I didn't mind. I made good money as a marketing director, and Jake always seemed genuinely distressed about his financial situation. Plus, he found creative ways to show appreciation that didn't cost money: handwritten notes, playlists he'd curated for me, surprise picnics with sandwiches he'd made himself. "You're too good to me," he'd say, kissing my forehead. I don't know what I did to deserve someone who sees past all this temporary stuff to who I really am. The requests got bigger gradually. After 2 months of dating, Jake's laptop died during an important job interview video call. "I'm devastated," he told me, his voice breaking over the phone. This was my shot at a marketing position with a startup that's about to go public. They want to reschedule, but I can't do another video call from my phone. It looks so unprofessional. "How much is a decent laptop?" I asked. "I found one for $1,200 that would be perfect, but Lisa, I can't ask you to. Consider it an investment in our future," I said, already opening my laptop to shop online. "When you land this job, we'll celebrate." The laptop arrived, Jake got the job, and for a week everything seemed perfect. Then came the rent crisis. "The startup's having cash flow issues," Jake explained, pacing around my apartment with his hands in his hair. "They promised to pay us by month end, but now they're saying it might be delayed. My landlord is threatening eviction, and I've already used my credit cards for job search expenses. $1,500 for rent. Then $800 for his car payment when the startup delayed payroll again. Then $1,000 for his mother's medical emergency, complete with fake hospital bills that looked completely legitimate. Each time, Jake was emotional, grateful, and promised it was temporary. Each time, I believed him because the alternative, that this thoughtful, affectionate man was playing me, seemed impossible. The breaking point came after 6 months, when Jake asked for $3,000 for a business opportunity. Lisa, I know this sounds crazy, but my former business partner reached out. He's launching a new company and wants me to come on as a co-founder. I just need to invest $3,000 for my equity stake, and I'll be back on my feet financially. It's the break I've been waiting for. I hesitated for the first time. $3,000 felt different than covering dinners and temporary expenses. I understand if you can't, Jake said quickly, seeing my expression. It's a lot of money, and you've already done so much. I just thought, we're building a future together, right? When this takes off, we'll buy that house we talked about, maybe start thinking about marriage. Marriage. He'd never mentioned marriage before, but hearing it made my heart race. I transferred the money that afternoon. 2 days later, Jake vanished. Not gradually. Not with an explanation or a fight or even a goodbye text. I woke up Tuesday morning to discover I was blocked on every platform we'd connected on. His phone number went straight to a "this number is no longer in service" message. His Instagram, Facebook, even his dating app profile, all gone, like he'd never existed. I spent the first week convinced something terrible had happened. Maybe he'd been in an accident. Maybe his phone was broken. Maybe he was in the hospital and couldn't reach me. But when I called the startup where he supposedly worked, they'd never heard of Jake Morrison. The apartment complex where I'd sent rent money? No tenant by that name. The business partner with the investment opportunity? Didn't exist. $15,000. 6 months of my life. And a heartbreak so complete I could barely function. I was sitting in my apartment 2 weeks after he disappeared, still hoping my phone would ring, when my friend Melissa called with an urgent tone. Lisa, I need you to sit down. I found something on Instagram. She sent me a screenshot that made my stomach drop. Jake, tanned and relaxed, on a beach in Cancun with his arm around a beautiful blonde woman. The caption read, "Life's too short not to travel with your favorite person. #blessed, #paradise, #couple goals." The photo was posted 3 days after he ghosted me. There's more, Melissa said gently. I did some digging. His Instagram account under Jake_Morrison_real has dozens of photos from the past 6 months. Lisa, he was dating other women the entire time you were together. The photos told a story that shattered my remaining illusions. Jake at expensive restaurants with a brunette I didn't recognize. Jake at a wine tasting with a redhead, both of them laughing intimately. Jake at what looked like a company party with yet another woman, both dressed formally and looking very much like a couple. Every photo was from a date or time period when he was supposedly exclusive with me. When he was telling me I was the only good thing in his life. When he was borrowing money for his temporary financial struggles. But it was the comments on his photos that really opened my eyes. Women writing things like, "Miss you, baby," and "Can't wait for our trip next month," and "Thanks for the most romantic dinner ever." Jake wasn't just a lying boyfriend. He was running a full-scale operation. I created a fake Instagram account under the name Sarah Collins and started investigating. It took me 3 days of careful social media stalking, but I identified 4 other women who appeared regularly in Jake's photos or comments. There was Amanda, a doctor who seemed to take Jake on expensive medical conferences. Jennifer, a lawyer who posted photos of them at high-end legal events. Maria, who worked in tech and appeared to have bought Jake the new iPhone he was showing off in recent photos. And Rebecca, who ran her own consulting business and had posted photos of them at what looked like very expensive resorts. Each woman posted about Jake like he was their exclusive boyfriend. Each woman seemed to be funding different aspects of his lifestyle, and none of them seemed aware the others existed. I spent a week crafting careful messages to each woman, posing as a concerned friend who'd heard troubling rumors about Jake. It took patience and delicate wording, but eventually, each woman agreed to talk. The stories were devastatingly identical. Amanda had lent Jake $12,000 for a medical device startup he was launching. Jennifer had paid for his car lease and insurance for 8 months because his law firm was delayed in processing his signing bonus. Maria had bought him a new wardrobe for job interviews, plus the iPhone, plus covered rent for his temporary apartment while he searched for something permanent. Rebecca had funded 2 expensive vacations because Jake was stressed from job searching and needed to recharge. Each woman had been told she was the only one. Each had been promised a future together. Each had been systematically drained of money through elaborate stories and emotional manipulation. When we tallied everything up in our group chat, which I'd named Jake's Victim Support Group, the total was staggering. $63,000 across 5 women over the course of 18 months. But Amanda, who had the most investigative experience from her medical background, discovered something that changed everything. "Ladies," she wrote in our group chat at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, "I found his next target. And she's about to get hit for way more than any of us." She'd found Jake's correspondence with Margaret Chin, a 58-year-old widow who'd sold her tech company for millions and was looking to invest in promising young entrepreneurs. Jake had been grooming Margaret for months, playing the role of the struggling but brilliant startup founder who just needed one major investor to change his life. Margaret was planning to invest $50,000 in Jake's revolutionary social media platform. They were scheduled to meet the following Tuesday to sign the paperwork. "We have to warn her," Jennifer typed immediately. But I had a different idea. "What if instead of warning her," I wrote, "we turn this into a trap?" The plan was ambitious and required all of us working together. Instead of exposing Jake to Margaret, we decided to let him think the investment meeting was going exactly as planned. But first, we needed to gather evidence that would hold up legally. Rebecca, with her business consulting background, helped us document everything: screenshots, bank transfers, text messages, photos, even recorded phone calls where legal in our states. Amanda used her medical connections to verify that Jake's stories about his mother's health emergencies were completely fabricated. Maria tracked down the real companies Jake claimed to work for and confirmed he'd never been employed by any of them. Jennifer researched the legal implications of romance fraud and wire fraud across state lines. And I coordinated the whole operation, using my marketing skills to create a comprehensive dossier of Jake's activities. The trap required elaborate preparation. We needed to make Jake believe Margaret was going to invest while actually setting him up for the biggest surprise of his life. Rebecca rented a conference room at an upscale business hotel, the kind of place where legitimate investment meetings happen. Maria designed fake business cards and letterhead for Margaret's investment firm. Amanda and Jennifer worked on the legal documentation that would make everything look official while actually being meaningless. And then came the twist that made everything perfect. When I told my Aunt Helen about the situation, Aunt Helen, who'd raised me after my parents died, who'd worked for the FBI for 30 years before retiring, she didn't just offer sympathy. She offered to play Margaret. "Sweetheart," she said with a smile that reminded me why criminals feared her during her active duty days, "I've been waiting my whole retirement for something this interesting." Aunt Helen had the perfect background to pose as a wealthy tech investor. She understood the industry, could speak the language convincingly, and most importantly, she knew exactly how to gather evidence that would stick in federal court. Romance scams cross state lines, which makes this federal jurisdiction, she explained as we planned. And if he's been doing this systematically with multiple victims, we're looking at wire fraud, mail fraud, and potentially identity theft charges. This isn't just about getting your money back. This is about putting him away for a long time. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m. Jake arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a sharp suit that Amanda recognized as one she'd helped him buy for job interviews. He looked confident, relaxed, completely certain that he was about to score his biggest payday yet. He walked into the conference room expecting to find Margaret Chin, wealthy widow, and Easy Mark. Instead, he found all 5 of us sitting around the conference table. The look on his face was everything I dreamed of for months. Confusion, then recognition, then absolute panic as he realized he'd walked into a trap. "Hello, Jake," I said, standing up from the head of the table. "We've been waiting for you." He tried to back toward the door, but Aunt Helen stepped out from behind it, closing it with a definitive click. "Please sit down, Mr. Morrison," she said with the voice that had interrogated countless criminals. "We have a lot to discuss." Jake's eyes darted around the room, taking in the wall covered with printed photos, bank statements, screenshots of his lies, and a detailed timeline of his activities with each of us. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, but his voice was shaking. "Really?" Amanda said, sliding a folder across the table. "Because we have documentation of $63,000 in fraudulent transactions. Would you like to explain the misunderstanding?" Maria opened her laptop and turned it toward Jake, showing a spreadsheet that detailed every lie he'd told each of us, cross-referenced with his actual activities based on social media evidence. "You told me you were exclusive with me," she said, her voice steady and cold. "But you were also exclusive with Lisa, Amanda, Jennifer, and Rebecca. And you were grooming Margaret for a $50,000 investment scam." Jennifer, using her lawyer voice, began reading from a legal document. "Jake Morrison, also known as Jake Stevens, Jake Mitchell, and Jake Chin. Yes, we found all your aliases. You're looking at federal charges for wire fraud, mail fraud, romance fraud, and theft by deception across multiple jurisdictions. But it was Rebecca who delivered the kill shot. The best part, Jake, is that we didn't just gather evidence of what you did to us. We found your other victims. Turns out, this isn't your first time running this scam. We found Sarah in Phoenix, who lost $8,000 to your medical emergency last year. Linda in Seattle, who paid for your startup equipment that never existed. And Emma in Dallas, who funded your mother's cancer treatment, the same cancer treatment story you told Amanda." Jake slumped in his chair, finally understanding the scope of what we'd uncovered. "How many women, Jake?" I asked, leaning forward. "How many hearts did you break? How much money did you steal? How long have you been doing this?" He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could answer, there was a knock on the door. Aunt Helen smiled and opened it to reveal 2 FBI agents in dark suits. "Jake Morrison," the taller agent said, stepping into the room. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and operating a romance scam across state lines." The handcuffs clicking around Jake's wrists was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. As they led him away, he looked back at us with a mixture of rage and defeat. "You don't understand," he said. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "You're right," I called after him. "We don't understand. We don't understand how you sleep at night, how you look at yourself in the mirror, or how you thought you'd get away with this forever." The legal proceedings took 8 months, but the outcome was everything we'd hoped for. Jake pled guilty to 14 counts of fraud across 7 states, involving a total of 23 victims and over $200,000 in stolen money. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. But more importantly, his arrest made national news. "Romance scammer targeting successful women caught in elaborate FBI sting" was the headline that appeared in newspapers across the country. Other victims came forward, and several copycat scammers were caught using similar methods. Aunt Helen and I started a consulting firm called Scam Justice Solutions, helping romance fraud victims gather evidence and work with law enforcement. We've helped recover over $500,000 in stolen money and put dozens of scammers behind bars. The 5 of us remain close friends. We call ourselves Jake's Ex-Wives Club and meet monthly for dinner. Dutch treat, always. We've each found healthy relationships with people who don't need us to fund their lifestyles. And sometimes, when I'm having a bad day, I remember Jake's face when he realized he'd been completely outsmarted by the women he thought he was conning. Never underestimate the power of women working together. And never, ever try to con someone whose aunt used to hunt down federal criminals for a living. If this story gave you the satisfaction you needed today, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories where the bad guys get exactly what they deserve. Comment below if you've ever dealt with someone who turned out to be too good to be true. You might be surprised how many people have similar experiences. And remember, if something feels off about someone's story, trust your instincts. I'll see you in the next video.